Hey there, welcome to Truth Talk Thursday. I'm Jenny Kimmel, host of Momma Drama and Trauma, and today we're diving deeper into July. Not just what happened, but the emotional truth underneath it. Because July wasn't the kind of pain that knocks the wind out of your lungs like the early months. It was a quieter kind of heartbreak. A mother's heartbreak. In July, it wasn't just my marriage that felt the fallout. It was my kids. And when your kids hurt, really hurt, that's a different kind of pain. It's the kind that settles deep into your bones. So today I want to pull back the curtain and talk about the part of betrayal that so many moms live through, but so few talk about. What it feels like to watch your kids break in ways you can't fix. What it feels like to be blamed for emotions you didn't create. What it feels like to stay calm when your children speak the truth. And what it feels like when pieces of your life start coming back together quietly, unexpectedly, and beautifully. This is the deeper truth behind July. Let's go ahead and get into it. The hidden grief of watching your kids hurt. There's a grief that mothers don't talk about enough, the grief of watching your children carry pain that should have never been theirs. And July was the month I felt that grief in a way that nearly brought me to my knees. Seeing your child pace the living room, angry and confused, trying to figure out words for a storm they didn't create, it just does something to you. It breaks something in you that doesn't have a name. Because as a mom, we're supposed to be their shield. We're supposed to protect them. We're supposed to take the hit so they don't have to. But in betrayal, you can't do that. You can't protect them from the heartbreak they didn't choose. You can't protect them from a parent's decisions. And you can't shield them from the truth that their safe world wasn't as safe as they thought. And that helplessness, that quiet suffering, that is the kind of grief that crawls into your soul and doesn't leave easily. I remember looking at my boys in July and thinking, they are hurting because of something I didn't do. They are hurting because of something I couldn't stop, and I can't fix this for them. That's a mother's grief, a grief that is silent, heavy, sacred, and suffocating all at once. And nothing prepares you for it. Not therapy, not books, not time, nothing. You simply learn how to hold it, how to breathe it, and how to walk with it without letting it swallow you whole. The blame no one warns mothers about. One of the hardest truths of July was realizing this. When a father cannot face the truth of his children's emotions, he often blames the mother. And I became the target of that blame. It didn't matter that I wasn't talking about him anymore. It didn't matter that months had passed since I had said anything out of hurt. It didn't matter that I was focused on healing, stability, and moving forward. The narrative became, you're turning the kids against me. You're influencing how they feel. You're the reason they don't want to be around. And I remember thinking, how? How am I being blamed for emotions that were created by actions I didn't take? How is it easier to believe I'm the problem than to acknowledge their pain is real? But here's the truth every mother of betrayal learns. Kids don't need you to tell them how to feel. They feel what they feel. They see what they see. They know what they know. They witness the affair and the fallout from it. They experienced the shift, they felt the tension, they sensed the disrespect, they lived the fallout. Their emotions came from their own reality. But when the betrayer can't handle the truth that their children hold, they project it onto the one person who has been constant. The mother. It's twisted, it's painful, and it's exhausting. And it's one of the least talked about parts of betrayal parenting. Because being blamed while trying to pick up the pieces, that's a special kind of emotional brutality. It makes you feel unseen. It makes you feel misunderstood. It makes you feel like you're fighting battles you didn't choose. And yet, I kept showing up. I didn't defend myself every time. I didn't lash out. I didn't correct him. because my boy's emotional safety was more important than proving a point to him. And that's the part no one talks about. How strong a mother has to be when she's being blamed for the very thing she's actively healing from. The family meeting, watching your kids stand in their truth. This was the moment that changed everything. Sitting in my living room, my boys on the couch, him across from them, all of us breathing the same tense air. The boys asked me to be there because they felt safer with me in the room. They needed me, and I could feel that. And when they finally spoke, when they finally told him how they felt, it was like watching 3 hearts split open after nearly a year of being glued shut. They told him they didn't feel like they were a priority. They told him they felt replaced when she was around. They told him they didn't feel comfortable in his home. They told him they didn't want her there when they were there to visit. They told the truth that they had been swallowing for months. Their voices shook, their eyes filled, their hands fidgeted, but they spoke. They told the truth he didn't want to hear. And I watched it unfold as their mother, not their protector, not their interpreter, not their shield, but simply as their witness. And there is nothing more powerful than seeing your children choose their own voice. Nothing. I didn't interrupt. I didn't jump in. I didn't speak for them. I didn't soften their words. I let them own their truth. And I was proud, so proud in a way I can't fully express. Because that night wasn't about confrontation. It wasn't about choosing sides. It wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about being seen, being heard, being valued, being believed. And watching him hear their truth, really hear it, was a moment I will never, ever forget. That unexpected hug and the moment I finally released him. When the boys went upstairs after our family meeting, something strange happened. Not loud or dramatic, but this quiet shift in the room that felt heavy and unsettled. He stood by the door longer than usual, almost like he didn't know how to leave. Like the words he just heard from the boys were sitting on him in a way he wasn't prepared for. He looked anxious, almost scared, and it was written all over his face. And then he said it, softly, almost like he didn't want to admit it out loud. He was scared she would leave him if he asked her to give the boys space. And the moment he said it, I remember standing there thinking, why am I hearing this? Why am I the one absorbing your fear? Why am I still being handed emotional weight that doesn't belong to me? Because this wasn't my burden anymore. These were the consequences of choices he made. And yet there he was standing in my doorway, letting me hold that fear just for a moment. There was a strange sense of deja vu, but also a sense of distance, like he was talking to me out of habit, not connection. Like he didn't know where else to set his emotions, so he placed them where he always had, even though that version of our relationship no longer existed. And then weirdly, he asked me for a hug. The first hug in almost a year. And I did hug him, not because I wanted to, and not because of anything unresolved between us, but simply because in that moment, he was a human being unraveling. And I guess there was still a piece of me that understood what it meant to witness someone's fear up close. But the second our arms touched, I felt it. The emptiness, the distance, the emotional disconnect. There was no sting, no ache, no spark, no pull. Nothing inside me leaned toward that moment. It just was. It felt like hugging a past life, like hugging a version of someone I used to know, not someone I still knew. And something inside me settled as it happened, quietly, gently, decisively, because the truth was clear. He was no longer mine. His choices were no longer mine. His emotions were no longer mine. And whatever us used to mean had been gone for a long time. The hug didn't ignite anything. If anything, it confirmed what had already taken root inside me. I had already released him long before this conversation and long before this night. And as strange as it sounds, the hug felt more like closure than comfort, like a final nod to the fact that this chapter had already ended and I was simply acknowledging it physically for the first time. When he walked out the door carrying the weight of the boy's words, I didn't feel pulled back into the past. I didn't feel shaken. I didn't feel emotional turmoil. I didn't feel anything that tied me to him at all anymore. Instead, I felt this quiet clarity, this soft recognition that I had finally stepped out of the emotional fog that I had lived in for nearly a year. The truth was simple. I wasn't holding him anymore. I wasn't trying to fix anything. I wasn't trying to understand him or carry him or save him. Whatever emotional cord we once had, it had dissolved without me even noticing. And there was something strangely peaceful about that realization. Not joyful, not triumphant, not bitter, just peaceful. Because that night wasn't about trying to make anything better between us. It was about witnessing the boys speak their truth and witnessing myself finally accept mine. Rebirth, reconnections, and the universe sending signs through fives. This is where the story shifts softly, quietly, beautifully. Reconnecting with my cousin, opening up to her, being invited into her world again, and that was an accident. That was a lifeline I didn't know I needed. For the first time in almost a year, I got out of my house. For the first time in almost a year, I laughed. I mean, really laughed. For the first time in almost a year, I let joy back in, and the universe sealed it with a wink. I won the poker run. A 4 of a kind, all fives, all different suits, 5, the number of change. 4 fives, 4 of them, stability rising out of chaos, different suits, different paths to the same transformation. If that wasn't a sign, I don't know what is. That moment told me, you're not done. You're finally waking up. You're stepping back into your life. You're allowed to feel joy again. It was symbolic. It was spiritual. It was healing. And it marked the beginning of my return to myself. And once I felt that shift, that quiet, powerful return to myself, something clicked inside me in a way it hadn't all year. I realized I was finally ready to start building my next chapter, a chapter that belonged to me. A chapter that focused on my boys and the life I want to create, not the life I was forced to survive. For the first time in a long time, I felt free to imagine the kind of future I wanted. Not as a wife, not as someone trying to hold a broken family together, not as someone waiting for someone else's choices to make sense, but as a woman rediscovering her own voice, her own wants, her own joy. I was ready to start living the life I wanted in the way I wanted without shrinking myself for anyone. Not for him, not for his choices, not for his opinions, not for anybody. I no longer cared about who approved or who didn't. I wasn't living for someone else's comfort anymore. I wasn't adjusting myself to fit someone else's story. That part of my life was over. From this moment forward, I was living for me, for my peace, my happiness, my future. And I will never again hand that power to anyone else. This was the turning point where I finally stepped into the woman I was becoming. Not defined by betrayal, but by rebirth. Thank you for spending time with me today and for being willing to go deeper into the truth behind July. This was the final month of my first year after betrayal, a year that shattered me, shaped me, strengthened me, and brought me back to life in ways I never expected. And as we wrap up the first year of my betrayal, our journey doesn't stop here, not even close. We have so much left to explore together, so much left to uncover, so much to heal, so much rising still ahead of us. Because this podcast isn't just about what happened to me, it's about what happens to all of us. The moments we survive in silence, the feelings we bury, the truths we're afraid to speak, the healing we all crave but rarely talk about out loud. And from here on out, we're going to keep talking. We're going to keep opening doors. We're going to keep having the conversations that matter, the ones about betrayal, motherhood, identity, boundaries, relationships, and all the everyday dramas and traumas that shape us into who we are. If you've been walking this journey with me, thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you've been healing alongside me, I see you. And if you have a story inside you, one that's been waiting to be heard, I would love for you to reach out and share it. This space is for all of us. We're not done. We're just getting started. And as always, you are strong, you are worthy, and your story matters. Until next time, take care of you.